The Galactic Nightmare Commission credits humans with teaching fear management skills. Part 1. The emergency meeting hall buzzed with nervous energy. Delegates from 43 species filled the chamber, their various forms of anxiety on full display. The representative kept his eye stalks retracted, a sign of extreme stress. The ambassador's skin flashed rapid color changes. Even the normally stoic archons fidgeted with their data tablets. Commissioner stood at the center podium, his crystalline body refracting the overhead lights into worried patterns. He had called this emergency session of the Galactic Nightmare Commission, and now everyone wanted answers he didn't have. "The crisis is accelerating," announced, his voice carrying the harmonics of deep concern. "In the past cycle alone, we've logged over 15 million requests for intervention. That's triple the rate from just 2 years ago." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Continued, pulling up holographic charts that painted a grim picture. Young people across dozens of species were developing crippling fears that prevented normal life. Children refused to leave their burrows. Youth wouldn't swim in open water. Archon adolescents experienced what they called emotional cascade failures when faced with uncertainty. The Galactic Nightmare Commission had existed for over 3,000 years. Their purpose was simple: monitor and address sleep disturbances, night terrors, and fear-based psychological issues across member species. For they had been quietly successful. A therapy session here, a meditation technique there, perhaps a mild pharmaceutical intervention for severe cases. The problems had always been manageable. Until now. "We've tried everything," said Dr. Morpheus, the Commission's head of psychiatric intervention. His species, though, were natural empaths who could sense and soothe emotional distress. Traditional therapy, chemical rebalancing, cultural immersion programs, even that new quantum meditation technique from the Void monks, nothing produces lasting results. "What's causing this?" asked the delegate, his voice tight with worry. "Our children used to explore the surface caverns without fear. Now they panic if they can't see all 4 walls around them." "We don't know," admitted. "Some theorize it's related to rapid galactic expansion. Young people are encountering more diversity, more unknowns, more possibilities than any previous generation. Others suggest it's a mimetic phenomenon, fear spreading through social networks. But honestly, we can't identify a single cause." The Archon representative stood, her silver robes catching the light. "Our analysis suggests this is a fundamental problem with emotional regulation systems. The young ones understand intellectually that their fears are irrational. They can calculate the actual risk probabilities. But that knowledge doesn't help. The fear remains, paralyzing them." A heavy silence settled over the chamber. Several species were already considering drastic measures. They had proposed abandoning surface colonies entirely. They were restricting their youth to shallow coastal waters. Some worried that the very foundation of galactic civilization, built on exploration and interaction, was under threat. That's when junior analyst raised a tentative appendage. She was young for a commission analyst, her blue skin still showing the bright patterns of youth rather than the faded wisdom marks of age. "Commissioner, I may have found something unusual in the database." Gestured for her to continue. His nervousness was obvious, but she projected her findings onto the main display. "I was running comparative analyses across all member species, looking at historical intervention requests. Most species show a predictable pattern: low intervention needs during development, slight increases during adolescence, then stabilization in adulthood. But one species has almost no requests at all." "Which species?" asked Dr. Morpheus, leaning forward with interest. "The humans." A confused murmur filled the room. Humans were a recent addition to galactic society, barely a century since first contact. They came from a planet designated as a Class 7 death world, with extreme weather, aggressive predators, and countless natural hazards. Their psychology profiles showed moderate to high baseline anxiety responses. By all logic, they should have been flooding the commission with requests for help. Are they simply not reporting issues? Asked. That's what I thought initially, replied. But I contacted their integration liaison. According to their records, humans do experience nightmares and fears, but they have extremely low rates of debilitating phobias. Their youth successfully transitioned to independent function at higher rates than almost any other species. How is that possible? The ambassador's colors shifted to confused purple. Their world is classified as extremely dangerous. Surely their young would be traumatized by constant threats. Hesitated before continuing. That's where it gets strange. I accessed their cultural database to understand their fear management practices. Commissioner, they deliberately expose their children to fear. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Raised a crystalline appendage for silence. Explain, he commanded. Pulled up images and video clips from Earth's cultural archives. The assembled aliens watched in growing horror. Human children gathered in darkness, listening to stories about monsters and ghosts. Older humans voluntarily entered buildings designed to frighten them, screaming and laughing. Families watched recordings of terrifying scenarios, what humans called horror movies, for entertainment. This is barbaric, said the delegate, his eye stalks fully retracted now. They traumatize their own young deliberately. It appears to be a core part of their development, said. They have entire industries built around controlled fear experiences. They celebrate something called Halloween, where children dress as frightening creatures and go door to door. They tell scary stories at gatherings. They even created a genre of literature specifically designed to frighten readers. Dr. Morpheus studied the data with fascination despite his obvious discomfort. And this doesn't cause psychological damage. Apparently not. In fact, human psychologists argue it prevents damage. They have research suggesting controlled fear exposure builds something they call resilience. They believe practicing fear in safe environments helps children handle real dangers later. Felt his structure resonating with uncertainty. His species, had evolved on a peaceful world with no predators and minimal dangers. The concept of deliberately frightening children was almost incomprehensible to him. Yet the data was clear. Humans functioned remarkably well despite, or perhaps because of, these practices. There's more, continued, her confidence growing. I found records of human colonies that tried to eliminate these fear practices. In the early 22nd century, several settlements decided to raise children without exposure to scary stories, frightening entertainment, or any controlled fear experiences. And prompted complete failure. That generation showed dramatically higher rates of anxiety disorders, inability to handle stress, and risk avoidance behavior so severe it prevented normal function. The colonies abandoned the experiment and returned to traditional fear integration practices. The chamber fell silent as everyone processed this information. The implications were staggering and disturbing. Could the solution to the galactic fear crisis come from humanity's seemingly barbaric practices? The Archon representative broke the silence. This contradicts all established psychological theory. Fear is a negative emotional state. All civilized species work to minimize it, not amplify it. Perhaps, said Dr. Morpheus slowly, that's been our mistake. Humans evolved on a world where danger was constant. They couldn't eliminate fear, so they learned to live with it. They integrated it into their psychology rather than treating it as something to be removed. Made a decision that would change galactic civilization forever. Contact the human psychological community. Explain our situation and request a consultation. If they've found a way to manage fear that we've missed in 3,000 years of study, we need to understand it. But Commissioner, the delegate protested, surely you're not suggesting we expose our children to deliberate fear. I'm not suggesting anything yet, replied. But millions of young people across the galaxy are suffering. Traditional methods aren't working. If the humans have knowledge that could help, we have a responsibility to investigate, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us. The vote was close, but the resolution passed. The Galactic Nightmare Commission would invite human experts to explain their fear management techniques. As the delegates filed out, some hopeful and others deeply skeptical stood alone in the chamber. He pulled up the human cultural files again, watching a video of human children laughing as they told each other ghost stories around a fire. The juxtaposition of fear and joy confused him. On his world, fear was something to be avoided, minimized, medicated away. The idea that it could be deliberately experienced and somehow turned into something positive seemed impossible. Yet the data didn't lie. Humans were thriving where other species were failing. 3 weeks later, the response came from Earth. 2 human psychologists had agreed to visit, Dr. Sarah and Dr. They would arrive within the month. Prepared his presentation for the commission, feeling an unfamiliar sensation in his core structure. He recognized it from the human emotional database he'd been studying. He was nervous, and for the first time in his long life, he didn't immediately try to make that feeling go away. Part 2. Dr. Sarah stepped off the transport shuttle and took her first real look at the Galactic Nightmare Commission Station. It was beautiful, all flowing curves and soft lighting designed to minimize stress. Every corner was rounded, every surface smooth. It reminded her of a hospital, or perhaps a very expensive meditation retreat. They really don't like sharp edges, do they? Doctor commented beside her, his dark eyes taking in their surroundings. Makes sense, Sarah replied, adjusting the strap of her travel bag. From what I've read, most of these species evolved on relatively safe worlds. They've spent trying to eliminate danger from their environments. Can't eliminate it from the mind, though. Nope, that's why we're here. Commissioner met them personally, his crystalline form refracting the station's gentle lighting into rainbow patterns. Sarah noted that his structure seemed to shift colors slightly, probably indicating emotional states. Right now, he appeared to be displaying what might be nervousness mixed with curiosity. Doctors and welcome. I cannot express how grateful we are that you've come. Happy to help if we can, said, shaking the appendage extended in what Sarah assumed was the local equivalent of a handshake. Though I have to admit, your message was pretty vague. You're having a fear crisis. Perhaps it's better if we show you, said. He led them through corridors that seemed designed to be as non-threatening as possible. No sudden turns, no dark spaces, everything visible and predictable. They entered a large observation room where other commission members waited. Sarah recognized several species from the briefing materials. The multi-eyed, the color-changing, the silver-robed archons. Activated a holographic display that showed statistics, case studies, and video footage of young aliens in various states of distress. A child cowering from an open doorway. A teenager hyperventilating at the edge of a pool. An Archon youth experiencing what the notes called an emotional cascade failure when presented with a simple choice between 2 foods. Sarah and watched in silence, their trained eyes picking up patterns. The fears were diverse, but the responses were similar. Total shutdown, inability to function, terror disproportionate to actual threat. We've tried everything in our therapeutic arsenal, Dr. Morpheus explained, his empathic nature visible in the concern radiating from him. Nothing produces lasting improvement. They understand intellectually that their fears are manageable, but the emotional response overwhelms rational thought. How long has this been happening? Sarah asked. It's been gradually increasing for about a decade, but the acceleration in the past 2 years has been dramatic. Glanced at Sarah. They were both thinking the same thing. Have there been major social changes in that? Increased connectivity, maybe? More exposure to diverse cultures and ideas? Yes, actually, confirmed. The Galactic Network underwent massive expansion 5 years ago. Young people now have access to information about thousands of species, millions of worlds, countless possibilities. And they're shutting down from the overwhelm, Sarah said softly. She turned to address the room. Commissioners, with your permission, I'd like to explain how humans handle fear. But I need to warn you, some of what I'm about to describe is going to sound cruel. It's not, but I need you to hear me out before judging. The aliens exchanged uncertain glances, but nodded. Sarah took a breath and began. On Earth, we have a saying, you can't avoid fear, so you might as well make friends with it. Humans evolved on what you've classified as a death world. We had predators that could kill us, whether that could freeze or burn us, diseases, natural disasters, all sorts of dangers. Fear kept us alive. But you've advanced beyond those primitive conditions, the Archon representative said. Surely modern humans have eliminated such threats. Physically, yes, but psychologically, fear doesn't just go away because you're safe now. It's hardwired into our brains, so we learn to work with it instead of against it. She pulled up her own tablet displaying images from Earth. Human children are exposed to controlled fear from early childhood. We tell them stories about monsters, ghosts, things that go bump in the night. We have a holiday called Halloween where kids dress up as scary things. We make movies designed to frighten us, and we watch them for fun. We even build places called haunted houses that people pay money to enter, just to be scared. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Sarah waited for the noise to die down. I know how it sounds, but here's the thing. We do all of this in safe, controlled environments. A child hears a scary story, but they're sitting with their family by a warm fire. Someone watches a horror movie, but they can pause it anytime. A person goes through a haunted house, but they know it's actors and props. But why? Dr. Morpheus asked, genuinely baffled. Why deliberately cause distress? Stepped forward. Because fear is like a muscle. If you never use a muscle, it atrophies. When you finally need it, it fails you. If you overwork a muscle without rest, it gets injured. But if you exercise it properly with appropriate intensity and recovery, it gets stronger. He pulled up charts from human psychological studies. We did experiments. In the early 22nd century, some human colonies tried to raise children without any exposure to fear. No scary stories, no challenging experiences, everything safe and predictable. They gave the kids medication to prevent anxiety. They thought they were being kind. What happened? Asked, though his shifting colors suggested he already suspected. Disaster. Those kids grew up unable to handle normal stress. They couldn't take risks, couldn't make decisions when outcomes were uncertain, couldn't function in the real world where things sometimes go wrong. The anxiety they'd been protected from came back 10 times worse because they had no tools to handle it. Sarah took over again. The key is controlled exposure. We call it graduated exposure therapy in clinical settings, but humans have been doing it culturally for thousands of years. You start small. A child afraid of the dark might first hear a story about the dark, then sit in a dim room, then a darker room, always with support, always able to stop if it's too much. And this works, the delegate asked skeptically. It's the most effective treatment we have for anxiety disorders. But more than that, it's preventative. Kids who grow up practicing being afraid in safe ways develop resilience. They learn that fear is just an emotion, not a command. They can feel afraid and still act. The Archon representative stood, her logical mind clearly wrestling with the concept. You're saying fear should not be eliminated but integrated. Exactly, confirmed. Fear is information. It tells you something might be dangerous. But if you've never practiced being afraid and handling it, that information feels overwhelming. If you've practiced, you can acknowledge the fear, assess whether it's proportional to actual danger, and decide how to respond. But the stories, the movies, the haunted houses, Dr. Morpheus pressed, those aren't real dangers. You're creating artificial fear. Sarah smiled. That's precisely the point. Artificial fear in safe environments trains the emotional system without real consequences. It's like a fire drill. You practice evacuating a building so that if there's ever a real fire, you know what to do instead of panicking. She pulled up video of human children at a campfire, telling ghost stories. Despite the scary content, the kids were laughing between scares, nudging each other, clearly enjoying themselves. Notice they're scared and having fun at the same time. That's the catharsis. They experience the fear, process it, and come out the other side feeling capable. Each time they do this, the fear becomes less overwhelming. They build confidence that they can handle being afraid. Studied the video with fascination. His species had no concept of enjoying fear. The idea was alien, almost incomprehensible. Yet these human children were clearly both frightened and happy. Could this work for other species? He asked quietly. Sarah and exchanged glances. That's the big question, Sarah admitted. Every species has different neurology. What works for humans might not translate directly, but the principles, controlled exposure, graduated difficulty, safe environments, building emotional resilience through practice, those principles might be universal. We'd need to adapt everything to each species, added. What scares a human might not scare a. The pace of exposure would vary. The support structures would need to be culturally appropriate. But yes, I think the core concepts could work. The room fell into contemplative silence. Finally, the Archon representative spoke. This contradicts everything we've believed about emotional health. We've spent trying to eliminate negative emotions, to achieve perfect peace and balance. How's that working out? Asked gently. The Archon's silence was answer enough. Made his decision. We'd like to try a pilot program, small scale, carefully monitored. Would you be willing to help us design it? Sarah felt a surge of excitement. Absolutely. But we need to be clear, this won't be quick or easy. Changing how an entire society thinks about fear is a massive undertaking. We understand, said, but millions of young people are suffering. If there's even a chance this could help, we have to try. As the meeting concluded and details were discussed, Sarah found herself standing at a window overlooking the station's central garden. Everything was designed for maximum serenity. Gentle water features, harmonious plant arrangements, soft ambient sounds. Joined her, think it'll work. Honestly, I don't know, but they're willing to try and that's what matters. They're scared of the solution, but they're going to do it anyway. Chuckled, teaching by example. The best kind. Part 3. 6 months later, the pilot program opened its doors. They'd named it the Resilience Integration Center after rejecting Sarah's half-joking suggestion of the Nightmare Academy. The facility occupied a small station in the outer reaches, deliberately plain and non-threatening to avoid overwhelming the participants. 30 young aliens from 15 different species arrived for the first session, along with their worried parents or guardians. Sarah watched them file into the orientation hall, noting the various signs of anxiety: retracted eye stalks, color-flushed skin, rigid postures, nervous humming. "Welcome," she began, speaking through the translation system that rendered her words in each species' native language. "You're here because fear has been making your life difficult. We're not going to take that fear away. We're going to teach you how to be friends with it." A young named raised a tentacle. "But I don't want to be friends with fear. I want it gone." Sarah smiled. "I understand, but fear is like that annoying classmate who sits next to you every day. You can't make them disappear, so you might as well learn to get along. Besides, fear is trying to help you. It's just not very good at its job because it hasn't been trained properly." Over the following weeks, the human team introduced concepts slowly and carefully. They started with basic education, helping the young aliens understand what fear was on a neurological level. Not a monster or a weakness, just a survival mechanism doing its best. Then came the fear ladder. Each participant identified their specific fears and ranked them from least to most frightening. Terrified of open spaces after a lifetime in underground burrows, started by looking at pictures of the sky. Just pictures, displayed on a small screen with Sarah sitting beside her. "How do you feel?" Sarah asked gently. Scared admitted, her eye stalks barely extended. "That's perfect, you're doing great. But I'm afraid." "Yes, and you're looking at the picture anyway. That's courage. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it." They spent 3 days on pictures, then videos of open spaces, then sitting in a room with a window showing the actual sky outside, though kept her eyes on the floor most of the time. Sarah never pushed, never forced, but she also never let avoid the challenge entirely. "You can stop any time," Sarah reminded her during each session, "but I think you can do this." On day 12, looked up at the window. She stared at the open sky beyond the station for a full minute before her eye stalks retracted in fear. But the next day she looked for 2 minutes, then 5, then 10. Meanwhile, worked with a group of Archon teenagers experiencing emotional cascade failures. These young aliens prided themselves on logic, but their emotions overwhelmed their rational minds when faced with uncertainty. "Logic is a tool," explained. "Emotions are also tools. You don't need to choose between them, you need to use both." He introduced them to human fiction, starting with simple stories and working up to complex narratives with frightening elements. They watched edited portions of films like Jaws and Alien, with pausing frequently to discuss what they were feeling and why. "Notice how the music makes you tense even before anything scary happens," he asked during a screening. "That's your emotional system responding to cues. It's giving you information about potential danger." "But we know it's not real," one of the Archons protested. "Logically, we're safe." "Exactly. And that's what makes this perfect practice. Your emotional system is sending danger signals, but your logical system knows you're safe. So you get to experience fear and simultaneously recognize it's manageable. That's the integration we're teaching." The breakthrough came 3 weeks into the program. Introduced the concept of horror as entertainment, explaining why humans created and consumed scary stories. The Archons were baffled at first, but then one of them, a young female named Synthesis, had an epiphany. "It's emotional exercise," she said slowly, "like a simulation program for feelings." "Exactly," confirmed. "We run simulations for everything else. Combat scenarios, diplomatic negotiations, engineering problems. We expose ourselves to challenging situations in safe environments to prepare for real ones. This is the same thing, but for emotions instead of skills." Once the Archons understood fear management as a logical training protocol rather than an illogical human quirk, they embraced it enthusiastically. They began designing their own fear exercises, approaching emotional resilience with the same systematic rigor they applied to mathematics. As the weeks passed, the program expanded. The human team introduced species-appropriate versions of various Earth traditions. Campfire storytelling became void-light gatherings, where students shared tales of cosmic mysteries and manageable monsters. Halloween-inspired mask ceremonies, where students dressed as things that frightened them, taking ownership of their fears. The biggest innovation was the Fear Maze, an alien-appropriate version of a haunted house. Each species had a customized path with scenarios tailored to their specific anxieties. Participants knew they could leave anytime, that everything was simulated, that they were completely safe. But they chose to walk through, to face their fears voluntarily. Sphere Maze included progressively larger open spaces, culminating in a room with a transparent dome showing open sky and distant stars. Sarah walked with her, offering support but not rescuing her from the challenge. "I don't know if I can do this," whispered as they approached the dome room. "You don't have to," Sarah assured her. "But you've come so far, You've already done things you thought were impossible. Stood at the threshold for a long moment. Then, her eye stalks trembling but extended, she stepped into the room. She looked up at the open sky beyond the dome. And she started crying. Sarah tensed, ready to intervene, but held up a tentacle to stop her. "These are good tears," she managed. "I'm looking at the sky, I'm so afraid, but I'm doing it anyway." They stood there together, teacher and student, while processed the enormity of her achievement. She was afraid, genuinely, deeply afraid. But she was also standing under an open dome, looking at infinity and not running away. By the end of the 6-month pilot program, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. 27 of the 30 participants showed significant improvement in daily functioning. 23 reported actively pursuing goals they'd previously abandoned due to fear. Follow-up assessments suggested the skills were persisting, not disappearing once the program ended. But the statistics, impressive as they were, didn't capture the real transformation. Sarah saw it in the way Now walked with her eye stalks fully extended, in the confidence of the Archon students as they discussed emotions with the same comfort they discussed equations, in the general sense of capability that radiated from the graduates. The Galactic Council convened to hear the results. Commissioner presented the findings to representatives from hundreds of worlds, many of whom had watched the pilot program with skeptical interest. "The humans taught us something we'd forgotten or perhaps never knew," began. "Fear is not the enemy. Avoidance of fear is the enemy. When we try to eliminate all discomfort from our children's lives, we don't protect them, we cripple them." He showed footage from the program. Young aliens facing their fears, struggling, sometimes failing, but always supported and always given another chance to try. The humans have a saying: courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear. They've taught our young people that they can be afraid and brave at the same time. That fear is just information, not a command. That practicing fear in safe environments prepares you for unsafe ones. The vote to expand the program was unanimous. Within a year, resilience integration centers opened on 50 worlds. Within 5 years, hundreds more. The curriculum adapted to each species while maintaining core principles: controlled exposure, graduated challenges, safe practice environments, and the revolutionary idea that fear should be integrated rather than eliminated. Doctor and Doctor became unlikely celebrities across the galaxy, though Sarah never quite got comfortable with the attention. They trained thousands of counselors from dozens of species in human fear management techniques, always emphasizing adaptation and cultural sensitivity. The official ceremony recognizing humanity's contribution took place 3 years after the pilot program. Sarah stood on a stage before billions of viewers across hundreds of worlds, feeling more nervous than she'd ever felt entering any haunted house. "We didn't invent courage," she said into the microphone. "Every species has brave individuals who face their fears. We just systematized the practice. We turned it from something that happened accidentally to something that could be taught deliberately." She paused, looking out at the diverse audience. "Our planet forced us to learn this lesson early. Earth is dangerous, always has been, probably always will be. We couldn't make the dangers go away, so we learned to dance with them. We learned that running from fear makes it bigger, but facing it in small steps makes it manageable. The galaxy is vast and full of unknowns. That will never change. But now your young people have tools to face those unknowns. They understand that feeling afraid doesn't mean they can't act, that fear and courage can exist in the same moment, that being afraid and doing the thing anyway is what bravery actually looks like." After the ceremony, Commissioner approached Sarah privately. His crystalline form shifted colors in a pattern she'd learned meant embarrassment. "I have a confession," he said. "I've enrolled myself in the next session at the Resilience Integration Center." Sarah tried not to smile too widely. "Really?" My species evolved without predators, without significant dangers. We've spent avoiding anything uncomfortable. After watching the pilot program, I realized I've never truly tested myself. I want to know what it feels like to choose to face fear. What are you afraid of? Sarah asked gently. Uncertainty, lack of control, the possibility of making wrong decisions. He paused. And apparently something called a roller coaster. Doctor suggested it as an advanced exercise. Sarah did smile then. Roller coasters are excellent for controlled fear practice. They're scary, your body reacts with real fear responses, but you're actually completely safe. I'm not sure whether to be excited or terrified, admitted. That's perfect, Sarah assured him. That's exactly the right response. That feeling, the mixture of fear and anticipation, that's the sweet spot. That's where growth happens. As left to prepare for his own fear training, Sarah looked out at the station's central garden. It still had the gentle water features and harmonious plants, but now it also included a climbing structure where young aliens could practice heights, and a shaded maze where they could practice uncertainty. The galaxy was learning what Earth had always known. Safety isn't about eliminating challenges. It's about being equipped to handle them. Fear isn't something to be cured. It's something to be trained. Found her there, watching a group of mixed-species youngsters laughing as they encouraged each other through the maze. "Think we've changed the galaxy?" he asked. "I think we've given them permission to be imperfect," Sarah replied. "To be scared and try anyway, to fail and try again, to be messy and emotional and still capable. Very human of them. Very alive of them," Sarah corrected. "We just reminded them that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and showing up anyway." In the garden below, a young emerged from the maze, eye stalks fully extended, announcing proudly to her friends that she'd been terrified the entire time but had completed it anyway. Her friends celebrated as if she'd won a great victory. Because she had. And across the galaxy, millions of young people were learning the same lesson. Fear is just the beginning of bravery, not the end of it.